Hi, my name's Andrew and I'm doing Supreme Court decisions about racial discrimination. Particularly in cases involving racial discrimination and civil rights, the Supreme Court had been crucial to the 14th Amendment's application of the Bill of Rights to the states. Following are some significant rulings of the Supreme Court on racial discrimination and the related laws. The first case I'm going to talk about is Brown v. Board of Education, 1954. This significant decision overturned the separate but equal principle established in Plessy v. Ferguson and deemed racial segregation in public schools to be illegal. It made advantage of the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. I'm going to be talking about the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's an important piece of law that forbids racial discrimination in employment and other settings. Among others, even though it was not upheld by the Supreme Court, it was passed in order to carry out the 14th Amendment's equal protection guarantees. Another case I want to bring in is Griggs v. Duke Power Co., and it was in 1971. This case supported the disparate impact basis of discrimination under the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. It was decided that if unfair hiring procedures negatively impacted ethnic minorities, they could be taken into account even if there was no clear purpose to do so. The final case I'm going to talk about is Chevy v. Holder, 2013. Despite not having a direct bearing on affirmative action, this case dealt with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The court invalidated a crucial clause that mandated that certain areas with a track record of racial discrimination get federal plea clearance before changing their voting laws. Voting rights and racial discrimination were significantly affected during this ruling. In conclusion, the Supreme Court's continued role in interpreting the 14th Amendment's provisions of equal protection and due process, as well as its efforts to abolish racial discrimination in a variety of settings such as education, employment, and voting, are reflected in these rulings and laws. They continue to be crucial points of reference in issues of civil rights and racial equality because they have formed the legal environment around racial discrimination in the United States. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'll be sharing with you all a short brief about our Supreme Court's decision regarding racial discrimination cases and how that affects us in many ways you all didn't think of. So firstly, before we begin, I will offer you all the definition of racism, or as some of you can associate it with racial discrimination, simply because it is important to understand what we are dealing with here. Racial discrimination is treating one or more individuals with hostility because of their race, ethnicity, and the color of their skin. Some examples that demonstrate how this is done are purposely excluding them from social gatherings, business projects, or refusing to offer resources for the foregoing reasons. Now, it is important to know that this information because it is something that affects us, our families, and our friends. It is also important to know what steps our government takes and what it has to say about racial discrimination within our society. If government decides that some issues are okay or not, it affects us on the outcome because that helps dictate what will happen with our society and how it behaves. Additionally, as far as I know, is that all of us here, students, we can all agree that we want to feel included and respected, and we all want a fair chance to study, right? So I will present you this famous case about racial discrimination. As you've seen from my previous teammates, he mentioned Brown v. Board of Education. Now, this is the case where a Supreme Court decided that the state laws that establish racial segregation in public schools, that it is unconstitutional and violated the 14th Amendment. It is imperative that we know our civil rights and liberties and how they are being infringed upon, and to know the difference between civil rights and our liberties. Liberties are personal freedoms protected by the government, and the civil rights are dealing with legal protection of discrimination.
Hello everyone, my name is Manal Fayyad, and today I'll be talking about the constitutional provisions about racial discrimination. The U.S. Constitution includes several provisions that address racial discrimination. These provisions were included in the Constitution in the years following the Civil War in an effort to protect civil rights for everyone, regardless of their race. One of the most important constitutional provisions addressing racial discrimination is the 14th Amendment. Several clauses of this amendment, which was enacted in the 1868, are relevant to the subject of racial discrimination. The most frequently used term, equal protection of the laws, refers to the idea that the governmental body may not deny people equal protection of its governing laws. Frequent disputes can be seen in many well-known cases, including the case of Brown versus Bush, Board of Education, that was about discrimination based on race, and Roe versus Wade, reproductive rights, Reed versus Reed, gender discrimination, Bush versus Gore, election recounts, and the University of the United States versus Big. Other constitutional provisions, in addition to the 14th Amendment, there are other constitutional provisions that deal with racial discrimination. These include slavery and forced labor, which were made illegal by the 13th Amendment. Voting rights cannot be restricted based on race, according to the 15th Amendment. The 5th Amendment has been construed to prohibit the federal government from engaging in racial discrimination. And the equal protection of civil rights. Several significant parts of the U.S. Constitution prohibit racial discrimination. All people's civil rights have been safeguarded by these laws regardless of their race. Finally, the Citizenship Clause. According to the 14th Amendment's Citizenship Clause, every person born in the United States is a citizen of both the country and the state in which they presently reside. The Dred Scott decision, which stated that African Americans were not entitled to become citizens, was intended to be overturned by this clause. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. I have a wonderful day.
How can we fight racial discrimination so everyone will be treated fairly and equally? Our government uses legislation and executive orders. Legislation is the preparation and enacting of laws by local, state, or national legislatures. In basic terms, they are the laws that we all must follow. One example is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Title VII is a federal law that prohibits employment discrimination based on race, religion, national origin, color, including gender, gender identity, pregnancy, and sexual orientation. Protections include fairness when hiring employees, recruiting, and job advancement, equal compensation, equal employment terms, equal working conditions, and equal privileges, free of harassment and retaliation. An executive order is a directive from the President of the United States with much of the same power as a federal law. Article 2 of the Constitution vests executive powers to the President because the President is the Commander in Chief. Executive Order number 14031 was signed on May 28, 2021. Its primary purpose is to combat prejudice against Asian American and Pacific Islander communities, against anti-Asian bias and violence. Since COVID-19, the Asian community has experienced a drop in business, racial slurs, being spat on, physically assaulted, denied services, and workplace violence. An article in Forbes magazine on January 27, 2023 reports a racial incident when a woman attempted to fuel her vehicle at a gas station. She saw the gas station attendant Nigel Powers, and when she tried to get his attention, he told her, "I'll get to you when I feel like it." After several attempts to get service from employees at the gas station with no prevail, when she was leaving, she asked the employee, "Why didn't you help me?" The employee told her, "I don't serve black people." Eventually, the jury awarded the Oregon woman $1 million in damages. This kind of behavior should not be happening with all the protection the law offers its citizens. The law cannot protect against ignorance and people who have a deep rooted hatred towards other races. The one thing we can do is spread awareness and acceptance of other people's differences, whether it be race, age, skin color, or sexual orientation.